Welcome to the Ogles channel, thanks for watching today, and let's continue our journey through every single Game Boy and Game Boy Color game, and today we're going to focus on a game called Batman the video game that's based on Batman the movie from 1989. Now the game was developed by a company called Sunsoft, and Sunsoft was on a roll during this time period. They had all kinds of great games for the Game Boy and the NES, such as like the Batman on NES, they had Fester's Quest, they had Blaster Master, and also a Journey to Silius, which is like a Terminator 2 game, but they lost the license, so it just simply came out as a futuristic robot game. But all these were fantastic games, and Sunsoft was truly on a roll, and this Batman game on the Game Boy is of no exception. And this game got moved up into queue sooner than later because TCCI Tablet recommended it in an earlier video. And naturally, when someone comments about a game they want to see, I move it up in the queue, and so that's why we're covering Batman the video game today. Now, I always like to start the videos off by looking at the box art for the game, and the box art for Batman the video game is pretty much the exact same cover as Batman the movie from 1989. They really didn't change hardly anything about it. They got the bat symbol on there, Batman written out, and if there's one thing that's conveyed on this cover is that the game is based upon the movie, and the storyline is based upon the movie, the levels are based upon the movie. I mean, honestly, the cover does a fantastic job just letting players know, hey, you're getting a Batman game that's based upon the movie, not the cartoon show, not the comics. This is a tie-in to the movie. Now when you start the game up here, you got a pretty awesome little tile screen. You got the little bat symbol rotating around, sort of like reminds me of like how the Nintendo symbol would spin around in the GoldenEye game. But regardless, you got the bat symbol rotating around here, and finally when it comes to a dead standstill, the beat kicks in, the word Batman appears, and you have this awesome little chiptune music in the background. It's not the Batman song, but it sounds like something straight out of Mega Man, and I absolutely love it. Just give it a little bit of a listen to it right here. Now when you begin the game, you get a nice little cutscene here of the Joker sneaking into the chemical plant, so you know already like the game is following the movie pretty closely, and it continues that throughout the entire experience here. You have all these little cutscenes that are pretty much directly from the movie, but regardless, Jack or the Joker is sneaking into the chemical plant, and so naturally Batman's going to try to sneak in there as well to capture the Joker. And just like the tile screen, when it loaded in, the bat symbol rotating around, the level itself is rotating around before it appears to show Batman getting ready to start the level. And I know this is like something pretty minute, but these little bells and whistles like really add a lot of charm to the games, and I don't know, I can't help but like it when the game does something a little bit different. Instead of just saying like ready or player one start or just start, they actually have a nice little intro to the level itself. Now the first thing you're going to notice when the screen loads up here is Batman is pretty darn small here, and his suit really doesn't look like the traditional Batman. It's a little bit more buff or a little more bulky. It actually reminds me a lot of the Ben Affleck Batman from the newer Batman movies. And also to add on to that, like Batman's main weapon in this particular game is not his fist. He's not punching through and doing kapow and blam on all these enemies. He's actually just got a gun. He's just simply shooting all of these enemies. And the only Batman that had an actual gun that he continued shooting enemies with was the Ben Affleck Batman. And so I know this game was done from 1990, and Ben Affleck Batman didn't come around to 2016, 2017. I'm not sure, sometime around there. And I know this game has nothing to do with it, but I just love the fact that it somehow predicted what the Ben Affleck Batman was going to be, or at least in my mind, that's what I want to believe anyway. Now as you're journeying through the level here, most of the enemies are going to look pretty much the same. Some have different weapons as far as which guns they can shoot out, which blasts are going to come out, and there's all these little blocks that you can hop on, or you can shoot the blocks and blow them up. And sometimes when you shoot a block and blow it up, it makes the jumps a little bit easier for you. But also if you find the darker blocks, they have different power-ups, different weapons you can get, short range, long range, multi-shot of that particular weapon, extra lives, extra health. There's all kinds of stuff that you can get in these little blocks. So anytime you see a little darker block, you always want to make sure you destroy that. You may not want the item inside of it because sometimes it's a actual downgrade on your weapon, but you always want to at least blow it up and see what the block has to offer for you. It's like the little question blocks in Mario. You always want to hit it at least to see what's going to come out of it. But the first level here is basically you're on top of the roof, then you journey into the chemical plant, and you journey your way through the chemical plant, the rafters, amongst all the little, vats and whatnot. And for the most part, most of the enemies are pretty much the same throughout the entire experience. In this particular level, the biggest thing you're going to notice are just simply the different weapon power-ups. And I actually got some pretty cool power-ups. At first I was pretty excited, just simply the regular shot, because I got a multi-shot of it. I was like, hey, pretty good little gun for Batman. And then Batman came along, got a super shot, and he got one that was a little wave that journeyed across the screen. And finally I came across one that's the Batarang, and holy cow, this is the ultimate shot in the game. I never encountered another weapon that is as good as this one. I ended up getting a lot of different weapons throughout the experience, but the Batarang, I mean, you shoot it out, and then obviously it's like a boomerang. It shoots out, and it comes back, and almost all the enemies you get a guaranteed 2 hits on, and it's a great weapon to time your attacks on, and I can't say enough great about it, but you already know, it's Batman's favorite weapon is the Batarang, But naturally, at the close of the chemical vat level, you're going to go against Jack, who's going to become the Joker. You throw your Batarang out at him enough, hits him multiple times. It took way more shots than I had anticipated, but finally it kills him or it knocks him off into the chemical vat, and Jack officially becomes the Joker. So I mean, the game is following the movie pretty closely when it comes to this, and I like games that have a pretty good tie-in and actually follow the story instead of veering off in their own direction, and this game seems to hold up pretty well. And after you finish the chemical vat, you're off to Gotham City, and the level here is definitely a little bit harder than the first level. The first level, the platforming wasn't really there, it's just sort of to get you used to firing your weapon, taking the enemies out, and level 2 really brings in the platforming elements. As far as like special jumps that you have to make, or long jumps, or like some jumps where like little items come down on a platform that you just jumped on, so you have to jump pretty quickly from one to the other, and so like there's a lot of timing in this level. That's going to train you a lot for the later levels in the game, but level 1 focused on like the action, and level 2 is definitely focusing on the platforming side. And this level also begins something that's prevalent throughout the entire rest of the game, which most players probably wouldn't enjoy, but I actually like to a degree, and it's like the game like sort of trolls you a little bit. Like it throws a really crappy weapon out there, or like a downgrade, right next to an extra life. So in order to get to extra life, if you're not careful, you end up getting the crappy weapon as well, which is actually like worse than just dying in general, because some of the weapons are like really bad, like a short shot, which is like the regular gun. Oh man, it's awful, and I got stuck with it a lot in this game. But regardless, it like sets up little traps as far as like, you take a bad path, you get a bad weapon. You want the extra life, you gotta get a bad weapon. You accidentally busted this block, in order to make the jump, you gotta get a bad weapon. And so like the game sort of messes with you a little bit as far as like choosing which blocks to destroy, or which paths to take, or which items you want to get. And I can understand it being annoying to some players, and I even got annoyed a little bit at some parts, but at the same time, it makes you play the game just a little bit more careful, makes you pay a little bit more closer attention, and that's going to be more and more prevalent as the game continues on. And there is no boss in Gotham City, so you head straight into the museum level, and it's got pretty good graphics for the museum level. I mean, it's pretty standard little stuff here, you know, like the high arched windows, you know, little pillars, stuff like that. I mean, it looks like a museum. And in this level, I do get the most powerful weapon in the game, at least for a short time anyway. That's the laser effect here, and it was really powerful. It shoots through walls, and it takes enemies out in like no time. I still prefer the Batarang because of its effect, but the laser is really darn powerful. But it didn't last too long, because like I mentioned in the last level, the game is going to start setting up more and more traps in order to basically make you regress on your weapons. And this particular level is like these little platforms here. If you paid really close attention, you can see it's like a little bit different shade, a little bit different color, or like little black spots in it, and you could fall down into the little traps here, and you'd be set on a different path. And when you get on these different paths, it's going to take you to a little darker box that you have to destroy, and that's going to give you a regressed weapon. And so like, every time you fell into a hole, you already knew what's going to be at the end of that path. It's going to be a block that you have to destroy to make your weapon all that much worse and make the game all that much harder. So it's like rewarding players who really pay attention to the game, look for the little clues, look for the little traps, and you'll continue on getting like the best weapons in the game. But as soon as you make one mistake and you fall into one hole, you might as well just assume you're going to get a really crappy weapon at the end of that little journey that you're taking. And of course, when you get to the close of the level, you get this awesome little scene here of the Batmobile, and you think like, oh man, the next level is going to be a Batmobile level, racing through the streets. And it's not a bad level, but you get into the Batwing, and you're like, why didn't they do a cutscene of the Batwing instead of the Batmobile if the next level is a Batwing level? I don't know, it just didn't make a lot of sense, but regardless, the Batwing level is actually a pretty darn fun level. So you're basically in the Batwing here, and you're traveling through the sky over Gotham City, and you shoot out the little helicopters and little jet planes and little robots, and even at one point you're actually shooting the little Joker's balloons from the movie. So they actually like tied in the movie even a little bit more in this particular level. But as you're going through it, you're going to notice like there are a ton of projectiles coming at you across the screen, so many enemies, so many bullets just flying across, and I died a lot in this level, but I finally realized you can shoot not just forward, you can shoot backwards, and if you just simply hold the two attack buttons down, you can shoot in both directions at the same time. And that made these levels so much easier because I was just taking out enemies constantly, which helped with the number of enemies as well as the number of projectiles from them anyway, coming across the screen. And so that made it a whole lot easier. But at the end of the first part of the level, you get a pretty contra looking boss here as far as like a little robot here that opens up, and you'd think you have to shoot it when it opens up. Truth be told, I think you can shoot the robot at any time and it takes damage effects. It just doesn't like really register like when it has taken damage. It doesn't blink or anything like that. But it has all these projectiles shooting out at you. And my best advice here is just simply keep your eye on all the projectiles, avoid projectiles where you're shooting constantly, and naturally you end up hitting the boss at least some of the time, and eventually after enough of dodging the projectiles and just random hits on him, you'll end up taking the boss down. And after that, you head into the second part of the Batwing level, and you have 2 more bosses that come out at you. And both of these are actually probably more hard than the first boss. But once again, my advice is the same. Just keep your eye on the projectiles, dodge the projectiles where you're shooting constantly, and enough of those random shots will hit the boss, taking them down and busting them out of the sky. So far, the Batwing level, it was a really fun change of pace, but it really was probably the hardest level in the game thus far. And the final level that you're going to come across is the Cathedral in Gotham, and this is by far the hardest level in the entire game. The platforming, you're going back to your little 2D here, and of course the platforming is just incredibly difficult. The first part of the level isn't too bad. It's just a traditional platforming level. The jumps are a little floaty from Batman, which I didn't really mention a whole lot earlier because it didn't make a whole lot of difference, but when the jumps are so precise as they are in this level, and you have little projectiles coming down constantly at you, and these little spinning tops shooting up at you. I mean, the jumping is just incredibly difficult to keep track in this level, and not to mention trying to bust the blocks to get the best particular item. I ended up getting like the regular shot again with like the short distance, and it was like the worst weapon I could possibly have in the game, and I never could seem to like get rid of it either. And so I'm actually gonna be stuck with the worst weapon through the rest of the game, and it's all thanks to this level right here. And when you finish part 1 of the Cathedral, you move into part 2 of the Cathedral, and this brings in like one of my least favorite things that a game can do. It is a moving screen that continues to move forward with you. And so if you're not fast enough, you get killed by this screen that pushes you into a hole, or you get trapped in like little, walls here, it just sort of squishes you, and it makes you go at a certain pace. And when you have the worst weapon in the game, which is short range, and I can't seem to get rid of it, and you're making all these really precise jumps, and you're taking out all these little turrets and all these little enemies, this level here, it was just about impossible to get through it as far as like making all the jumps just right, shooting all the enemies just right, and I came across really having a distaste for this level. However, if you went into it with any better weapon than what I had, I think the level would be a heck of a lot easier. And when you get to the close of the level, you get to fight the Joker again. And I was a little disappointed because this fight is like identical to the first Joker fight when you fought against Jack. There's like really no difference in this fight and the last fight, except for the fact that like in this fight he can shoot bullets like out of his butt, and that might have been in the first fight as well, but it was definitely in this fight. It sort of caught me off guard and actually killed me a couple times because I was like, alright, I'm behind him, he can't hit me, and all of a sudden these bullets come out from the butt, and I'm like, okay, well, that seemed a little unfair. But regardless, I went into this fight with the worst weapon in the game, and I really had to like learn his jump mechanics and his specific moves he's going to do, and it was a fairly tough fight if you have the worst weapon in the game. I think once again, if you had any other weapon than the one that I had, I don't think this fight would be anywhere near as bad. But just like in the movie, the Joker falls off the edge here, and you got a final scene of him on the concrete, just like it's in the movie. And overall, I mean, the cutscenes, I mean, they're nothing like animated or anything like that, but they definitely represent the movie very well, and the game holds pretty faithfully to the movie itself. And the game ends here with an awesome little cutscene of Batman on top of the roof, looking at the bat signal in the sky. The credits begin to roll, and it's just perfect. I love the imagery of this old 80s Batman, and they really captured it in the sprite of this particular image in the game. Yeah, I know the character you played with throughout the entire game looked a lot more like the Ben Affleck Batman, especially with the weapon and the bulkiness. But right here, I mean, it just really captures who Batman is for the 80s, and it's a great way to finish the game. So as we look at the game as an overall, I actually think it's a really fun Game Boy game. Yeah, I know it's pretty simplistic as far as like the graphics, the backgrounds, but as far as like just simply the fun factor, it was a really fun run and gun game. I mean, you can duck down, you can aim your shots, got little items you can collect, some upgrades, little traps to try to, trick you into different areas. I mean, it had everything that I like inside of a 2D game, and despite being a little bit simplistic, I mean, it really did capture like the feeling of Batman journeying through Gotham City, especially when you have to go into like the Batwing level. I mean, it's just a really fun game. And then to top that off, you have like all the little cutscenes that tied into the movie. You have some awesome soundtrack music throughout the entire experience. It's only like maybe like hour and a half-ish to go through the entire game, which is a pretty reasonable little platform game, especially for this time. And I think if you're looking for a fun Batman game on the Game Boy, honestly, I don't think you can go wrong with this particular game. I haven't played the other ones in the series. I know there's like 4 or 5 or 6 more Batman on Game Boy. I mean, they really pushed the Batman games out there. But this is the one you come across. I honestly think it's a fun adventure. I think it lives up to the Batman legacy, and I think you'll have a great time with it. But if there's a game that you want to see me cover soon, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll move it up in the queue sooner than later, and I'll be covering the other Batman games at some point in the future as well. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, go out there, find a great game to play, just simply have a great rest of the day.